And you can tap the wheel. And if it's a dull thud, it's okay, but if it's got this tinny sound, don't use it. Okay, so now we've got the grinder, we've got the jig, we've got the wheel, we've got everything ready to go. Now we have to sharpen something, okay? There's an awful lot of things on the market for sharpening, setting up the grinder, setting up the wheels, but what are you going to sharpen your tool to? In other words, what is it going to look like when you're done? And most people don't have an idea. They really don't know. As I said, tools come not ready for use. So if you bought a bowl gouge, and I know an awful lot of people, and probably, no, we wouldn't have anybody here. Anybody use a bowl gouge right out of the bag and sharpen it just the way it was sharpened when you got it? Don't be embarrassed. Okay. I'm sure we have more. Okay. And the reason for that is nobody tells you. You don't know what it's supposed to look like. You have no idea unless you're with a group like this where people share information. Woodturners are very, very sharing of their information. They're not like, I used to own a locksmith business, and boy, you get a locksmith to tell you anything? You must be kidding me. They won't tell you a thing. And so basically, you need to know what is it supposed to look like when you're done. Craft Supply sells this very interesting set of imitation tools. And it's got a spindle gouge with two different profiles, one on each end. Can you see this profile?
Turn it sideways. Turn it. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, that's one profile. And this is another profile.
You got it behind them. You got your right hand in front of the left hand.
There you go.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that's a spindle gouge, and they have two bowl gouges with four different profiles. I'm not going to just show you each one, it doesn't really matter. But what you do is you find the profile similar to what you want. And again, I'll get into that when we get to bowl gouges. So what you can do is you can actually set up your jig and your Variground attachment to create any one of these profiles that you want. And it's a good starting place. As I told you, there is a perfect angle, but there's not a perfect grind. And again, we'll get into that. But basically, this is a way of starting to say, hey, I think that tool looks like something I can use because I remember why I need that. And you can actually set up your jig to work with this. The instructions come with the jig. They're fairly inaccurate, except in the way the leg works. But basically, when you change the position of the leg, you're changing the grind, how much this side rolls in. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? You're changing the distance that the tool is from the wheel, and you're changing the front angle. Now, yes? I thought somebody said something. One of the things you have to understand is there's a 16-degree difference between the front angle and the side angle. Does that matter? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But it's built into the tool. The geometry of the tool will give you a 16-degree difference in the two angles. So you have to find an angle that works for you. Generally, it won't matter. And again, I'll show you the angles when I get to the board. But basically, what it really matters is that you're getting it consistent. The jig will not shape the tool for you. All it will do is hold the tool at the proper angle. You shape the tool. Okay? I know a lot of people that buy all these jigs, they buy all this stuff, and they think that when they're done, the tool will be perfectly shaped for them. That's just not the case. It doesn't work that way. You've got to actually do it. But again, you need something to shoot for, and that's why these work real well. They're fairly cheap. Craft Supply has them. I don't know if anybody else has actually sold them yet. But basically, you use the Variground attachment to get that set up, and then you put your tool in, and it works fine. Who is having trouble sharpening? Let's get started that way. Good. What tool is giving you the most problems?
I'm trying to learn how to sharpen a bowl gouge.
Okay. You have problems? Scrapers. Spindle gouge. All right. How many people have a problem with the bowl gouge? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people have a problem with spindle gouge? It's about the same. All right. We'll get into bowl gouges first, and then I'll go through as many tools as you want to see. But basically, we'll go through them. But let me just show you something about the perfect angle, imperfect grind. Okay? Now, if I told you that a perfect angle existed, naturally you'd want proof, and that's what I'm here for. If I told you that this was 90 degrees, if this front angle was 90 degrees, it would look like this. This would be like 45, that's the way the angles would run, okay? We understand that. Do we also all understand that when you're using a bowl gouge, nothing happens in the front, it all happens in the back? Your front hand only holds the tool on the tool rest. All of the steering and the pushing comes from the back. Do we all understand that? Anybody not understand that? Good, that's good. So, if I had this at 90 degrees, which it is right now, and I pushed on the handle, which I am, nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. If I brought it back to about 75 degrees and I push, which I am, nothing happens. I can go to about 60, I can go to probably 45, but when I hit 40 degrees, look what happens. The tool slides. 40 degrees is the perfect angle for letting your tool slide across the wood. Now I see people are going to reach for a pen, you're going to write that down. Okay. But I'm going to show you it's not the perfect grind. So that kind of blows it. No. 40 degrees is the perfect angle, and it's something to shoot for. But let me show you why it's not perfect. Grind. I mean, it's a perfect angle. That doesn't right. We're going to call this a series of bowls. Okay? So this is a shallow bowl. This is a little bit deeper, and this is deeper yet. Okay? So now I take that 40-degree bowl, the 40-degree bowl gouge, and I line up the bevel, and I start out here, and I actually push it all the way towards the bottom. And no problem. Works fine. So 40 degrees is perfect, right? No. If I go a little deeper as I start to push in, look what happens. I hit. So it's not perfect. So now I take a gouge with a little different grind on it, let's just say 60 degrees. I put it back up in here, and it works all the way to the end. No problem. Well, then 60 is perfect, right? No. Because I go up here, and look what I do. So there is no perfect grind. What you have to do is you have to adjust your grind for the work that you do. Now, this you can write down if you like. Most people, well, okay, we have bowl turners here? Okay, what's your average size bowl?
Oh, probably 7 inches.
Okay, what's your average bowl?
My maximum is 12,
Okay, your average.
11 and a half.
Okay,
I do mostly spindle saddle board.
okay, anybody else do bowls here? Who else does bowls? Okay, what's your average size?
Probably 12 or 13 inches.
Braggart. The average size bowl that's actually made is 8 to 9 inches. Now, everybody runs out and they buy a Powermatic because it does a 20-inch bowl. Very few people actually do 20-inch bowls, and if you do, your wife says, what in the world am I going to do with that? I got to build another wing on their house like that lady in Naples? Anyway, the average size bowl is 8 to 9 inches, and the average thickness is 2 to 3 inches. That is average. And you go all over the country and you ask people, what size bowls do you make? And that's it. I get people that, I don't want a mini lathe, I want to turn bowls. What kind of bowls do you want? What size bowls? Well, I want them about that big. He'll do a 10-inch bowl. Not a problem. You can do it on a mini lathe. So the average size bowl that people make is 8 to 9 inches, 2 to 3 inches deep. If that's what you do mostly, and you create your grind that way you can make it all the way down without lifting off the bevel or without digging the cutting edge in, you can use that same ratio on any size bowl and your grind never changes. For instance, if you go twice as wide and twice as deep, the ratio is exactly the same. Nothing changes. That grind will work. But if you're doing 10-inch bowls 4 inches deep today, and tomorrow you're doing 20 inches bowls 9 inches deep, if the ratio changes, your grind has to change because the bevel will lift before you get to the bottom, or the handle is going to hit on the opposite side, or it may foul out over here. So the grind is specific to what you do. And this is why I talk about the fact that one grind does not fit everyone. So that's why the grind is not done at the factory. There's no way they're going to do it at the factory for you because they don't know what you're going to do with it. And they don't tell you all this because you're supposed to know. You know, I've never seen an industry where tools do not come with instructions, and they really don't, which is kind of interesting. You're supposed to know these things. By the way, does anybody know the history of wood turning? I mean, does anybody have any idea? It's the oldest power tool in existence. It's over 4,000 years old. And it was never designed for turning wood. It predates iron by 1,000 years. It was never designed for turning wood. It was designed for spinning metal. That's how they made the chalices and the bowls out of pewter and gold. That's what it was made for. somebody would actually carve out, either out of pottery or wood, would carve out a form, and they'd put it on a headstock. They put a hammered out piece of pewter or gold or something along those lines against the headstock, bring the tailstock up. They would rotate it by many different ways, usually a bow or different ways they'd rotate it. And somebody would take a flame hardened piece of wood and push it against the mold as it's spinning. It turns molten.
Metal spinner.
Yeah, it turns molten for a split second and it actually forms that mold. Take the mold out, you got a chalice or a bowl. 1,000 years later, iron was developed, and that poor guy who had to carve out the metal, carve out the mold, said, hey, wait a minute, let me try that on the machine. And woodturning was actually born. 1,000 years after the lathe was developed. And very little has changed in the lathe except the material that it's made from and the way it's powered. Other than that, very little has changed. Anybody here left-handed? Good. I knew I liked you. I believe, and it's only my belief, I can't prove this, I believe the lathe was invented by a left-handed turner, a left-handed person. I believe that. And I'm going to ask you to answer my question for me. We have bowl turners here. When you're turning a bowl, where do you stand? Right in front of the wood. So if it's going to come off, it's going to hit you. Where do the shavings go? Right at you. A left-handed turner stands back here and the bowl is up there. Who invented the lathe? When you're doing work close to the spindle, how do you get in there? Well, you've got to go like this. The left-handed person goes right in here. Who invented the lathe? Left-handed. I believe. It's just my beliefs. And besides, left-handed people are only people in their right minds anyway. So. You understand the science behind that laughter, don't you?
I like you, Gary.
Okay, so that's the reason that we have different angles on the front of the gouge. Now, sometimes, depending on how we turn, when you're going through the transition from the side of the bowl to the bottom, you have that short area where you're hitting end grain. And on some bowls, depending on the wood, depending on the size of the bowl, depending on the angle of the bowl, you have a rough time going through that transition. And you'll drop your handle, you'll rotate the tool, do all kinds of things to get through that little one spot to make it smooth. Does everybody understand what I'm saying about that part? Anybody had a trouble going from the side to the bottom? Because you're hitting that end grain head on. Well, sometimes you need the angle to be exactly the same. Because you're going to rotate that tool as you drop the handle, you rotate the tool, the tip comes up, it rotates, then it comes back down again, and you get a nice even cut. That's the analogy of a plane, a hand plane. When you take a hand plane, you notice how skewed the blade is? If it's straight, you have to skew the plane, and because it slices through the wood. It's the same thing. That's why you're rotating the tool to get that slicing action instead of like a chopping action of just trying to chop off that wood. So if that's the case, then your only choice is to grind that tool, and that's what this is right here. This is 40 degrees all the way around. There is no difference between the front and the side. You have to freehand grind that. That's the only way. And one of the ways that that's done, I don't know if you've ever seen Alan Batty's, Stuart Batty's discussion on that.
Yeah.
What he does is he'll take 40 degrees on one of these protractors. I'm not going to do it all because it's just a waste of time. But basically, you take this table out, and where the wheel is going to end and the tool is going to actually touch it, make a 40-degree line. You rotate it the other way. 40-degree line. Then you can take your tool, you roll it over where the flute is to the left. It's actually, the flute is, the sides of the flute are straight up and down. You bring it up to the wheel, if this is set at 40 degrees, okay, and you rotate it halfway, and then you go the other way, start the same way but the opposite side, line it up with that line, and bring it back around halfway, and you got 40 degrees. And that will be the same all the way around. That's only if you need it. Most people don't, but that's the way it's done. That's how they sharpen their tools very often. They'll walk up to it, the lines are there, they're cheating because you can't see the lines, they rotate it, and after you've done this a couple of million times, you can actually do it in one pass.